And a happy Thursday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We're going to be tracking some rain chances that are going to move into the later hours of tonight. Along with that, we do have a new update with our drought monitor. We have lots of good news to talk about when it comes to your weekend forecast. And we'll go ahead and give you a glance about what could be in store as we go into next week. But first things first, let's start out with that new update of the drought monitor. We actually did see some change. It's pretty hard to notice, but we actually did see this patchy area right here transition from a severe drought back down to a moderate drought. So areas like Macon, Warner Robins, Perry, over into Peach County, maybe easternmost Macon County, the Marshallville area, Jeffersonville. You guys saw your fair share of rain with the last system that came through over this past weekend and some of the systems as of recently. So that's why we have seen at least this tan area extend a little bit farther down to the south. Other than that, we didn't see any change. We still have areas in a severe drought in the orange, and we still have areas in an extreme drought. That is going to be down to the southeast here in central Georgia, over to the west in that red shade around Thomaston and northern Taylor County. So we definitely could still use some rain, but it was promising to at least see a little bit of improvement. And again, it goes to show that we do need a couple inches of rain in order to get out of these drought criteria boxes that we are seeing for the severe and the extreme drought. In fact, we're going to need roughly somewhere around 5 to 6 inches of rain over the course of a month, and that would be above what we typically get. So right now we're looking at maybe getting about 10 to 12 inches of rain over the course of the next month. That would finally put everyone out of these drought conditions, but it doesn't look like we have quite that in store. But we do have some more promising rainfall totals to talk about as we go into the later portion of today into early tomorrow, which will be taken into account with next week's drought monitor update. And just a quick reminder, you will see the as of date on this graphic. So it's as of February 24th. That was 2 days ago. That was on Tuesday. We take all the data as of Tuesday, but the drought monitor just gets released every Thursday morning, sometime in between 8 and 9 a.m. roughly. So we'll be on the lookout for that next week, but the main thing that you need to know is we definitely could still use some rain. We're seeing some low water levels. We're seeing some of that crunchy, that brown grass, which it is wintertime, so of course it's not too atypical. However, as we're now heading into this portion of the later portion of February, I guess you could say, and also March, April, May, there's going to be more substantial weather makers on the way that will have some heavier rainfall totals, especially given how warm we've been as of the month of February. So showers and storms moving in tonight. We have seen a lot of fluctuation with the timing of this approaching frontal boundary, so we'll break down the latest about what Future View does say. Rain is looking to linger into portions of Friday, mainly the first half of the day, but we aren't completely getting rid of rain chances until we head a little bit farther into the weekend. Actually, it's going to be more so around Saturday, around lunchtime, before rain chances completely get out of the picture. Mostly dry for the rest of the weekend after we do get the main cluster of rain and the main line of showers and storms move out of the picture as of Friday morning. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So you can still see that the Georgia National Fairgrounds sky cam. This camera is still frozen as of right now. It shows some clear blue skies, maybe even a bit of the sun beginning to set over here. So obviously that's not what the current situation looks like. It is a cloudy afternoon all across central Georgia. Here in downtown Dublin, up in downtown Macon and into Warner Robins, that's where we're seeing plenty of gray skies, and along with that, maybe even some darker bottoms to the cloud cover, which are going to indicate a couple of spotty sprinkles that are going to be present in a select few spots. So down here in Macon, sitting at 64 degrees, pretty similar to our neighbors like Montgomery and Charleston. Our fair share of 70s along the Gulf Coast, even back up into Mississippi, 70 in Jacksonville. And it's a good deal colder up into the Great Plains region of the country, getting over into the Midwest, the Great Lakes portion of the country. Some 50s, some 30s up in Indianapolis and Lexington, 45 in St. Louis, 48 in Washington, D.C. So once again, the Mid-Atlantic and New England portions of the country, those areas that just got hit by a ton of snow, are still on the cooler side of things compared to areas down here in the southern United States. It looks like most states like Texas, Louisiana, over to Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and then down here in Georgia and over into South Carolina, we're still holding on to that warmer and that more humid air mass. And of course, we know Florida always likes to hang on to that kind of air mass all times throughout the year, even if it is winter time. So 64 degrees in Macon. And you can see that that's probably on the upper end of the temperature range that we see. We spot a couple of 70s, one over in Starkville, 73 in Mobile, 71 in Valdosta, and a 72 in Jacksonville. Everyone else mainly scattered about the 60s and a couple 50s, 51 at the coolest all the way up in Greenville, and a 57 as you make your way over down to Columbia to the southeast of Greenville. So here in central Georgia specifically, 64 in Macon, there's a 65 in Warner Robins. Doesn't look like there's any temperature that I see above that 65-degree mark. So we haven't seen too much change in terms of these numbers over the course of this morning. They have gotten a slight temperature increase. We started out somewhere, say, in the upper 50s, maybe getting into the low 60s. It was more so a story of around 55 to 60 as you walked out the door. Now we're talking about a story about 5 degrees warmer than that, 61 to maybe 65 degrees as we approach the midday hour. So we are warming up, but it's not relatively quickly. So I do anticipate a slow climb in the temperature department through the rest of today. Keep that in mind when we do talk about the forecasted high before we talk about some rain chances that begin to move in and influence those temperatures in the opposite direction of upward, going downward just a little bit. Here's your winds and your wind gusts. We are going to see our fair share of gusty winds once again today. They have actually been present all morning long. We even saw some gusts this morning that are rivaling some of the gusts that you see in Cochran right now at 29 miles per hour. So these flashy areas of some red, maybe even some very faint pink, that's going to indicate some gusts that could get up to, say, 30, 35 miles per hour. In fact, even within some thunderstorms later on tonight into the early morning hours of tomorrow, we could see some wind gusts that get up to 45 miles per hour potentially. But in terms of the widespread breezy conditions, I would say plan on maybe about a 10 to 15 mile per hour sustained wind. So sustained wind, that's what those winds are constantly blowing at. But this yellow number over to the right of those sustained winds in the white number, that's going to indicate what your occasional gusts could get up to. So right now, some occasional gusts up to 16 miles per hour in Milledgeville, 24 in Macon, 22 in Vidalia and Swainsboro, 23 mile per hour gust in Cordele, and then taking the cake right there around a 30 mile per hour gust down in Cochran, and the sustained winds that are up to 17 miles per hour. It is already a very breezy afternoon. And in terms of the dew point temperatures, we have been talking about this over the past 24 hours, and really it has been something that's pertained to the forecast now that I think about it, about a week and a half ago, that we have been continuing to see these southwesterly winds, and that is pulling some shades of light green up into this dew point temperatures map, which right now we see a good mix of the upper 50s and the low 60s. It's not a super swampy environment, but it definitely is noticeable, especially given the fact that it's still the end of February. We are still in the winter time frame of the seasonal calendar. So of course, we're not quite used to necessarily feeling a little bit of humidity maybe this early into the end of winter before we get into the spring season. Satellite and radar, not entirely empty, but it has been like this for most of the morning so far. We have some spotty sprinkles and some light showers up in our northernmost counties, over into Butts County, right around Jackson, across over into Jasper County, Putnam County. This is actually looking like the steady most rainfall that we do see right now up north of Eatonton. Excuse me, right there. And up here in the Lake Oconee area, right here on the corner of Putnam County and Hancock County. A couple sprinkles just north of Sparta and northern Hancock County. And then we get over here into southern Jones County. We saw some dark bottoms of some clouds up in the downtown Macon area on that Skycam view. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of sprinkles are continuing to fall in between Macon and getting into the gray area, somewhere right there around southern Jones County, maybe making your way from Macon all the way up to Milledgeville. And then a few more sprinkles down here in Telfair, Wheeler, and Montgomery counties. Otherwise, this rain is not very widespread whatsoever, and you can see that there is a whole lot more widespread rain up in the northern portion of the state. So as you make your way up I-75 north, just north of the metro Atlanta area, getting up close to Rome, Georgia, Dalton, Georgia, as you make your way up to Chattanooga, that's where we see a more widespread cluster of mainly some steady showers, but maybe even some pockets of some heavier rain, and even starting to see a flash of lightning or two back up into northern Alabama. So that's going to be more so the rain associated with our frontal boundary that is going to begin to drive through, and that is looking to not necessarily continue its clean, fast motion down into central Georgia. We'll talk more about what that means in just a second too, but I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of a preview. That just means that the frontal boundary is going to stall for a brief moment before it kicks back into gear and moves into central Georgia later. So 68 for a high temperature yesterday. finally making the return back above average of 66 degrees. But your morning low temperature, it was right around where it should be as well, 38 degrees as compared to 41 degrees, just a little bit below average. And I did mention yesterday during this extended forecast, that's going to be the lowest that our temperatures do get for the foreseeable future. I don't think we'll actually get below the 40-degree mark for the next 7 days that we do have in the forecast. 82 for a record high temperature, 14 for a record low temperature, nowhere close to those numbers set back in 1930 and 1967. No rain, of course, yesterday in the forecast, maybe besides that 10% chance of a sprinkle. Doesn't look like that necessarily played out here over the Middle Georgia Regional Airport. So your year departure of rain is now around 3 inches, in fact, over 3 inches below where we should be at this point of the calendar year. But very thankfully, I imagine by the time we look at this graphic sometime tomorrow, that is going to indicate that we did get our fair share of rainfall. Maybe nothing really substantial in the way of those rainfall totals, because I think a good amount of the rain is actually going to come past the midnight hour. But as we look at it over the course of this weekend, hopefully we're going to see precipitation of at least an inch, maybe even possibly 2 to 3 inches of precipitation. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for some higher totals to put a significant dent in that negative number right now for the year departure. Sunrise 7:07 yesterday and sunset 6:29. So we are about to be at our first 6:30 p.m. sunset once again. And then as we go across the course of the next week and a half, in fact, your sunset's going to get an hour later. Yes, that's because we are going to have a time change as we get into next week, but we're still a little bit too far away to be talking about that as of right now. The main concern is going to be the temperatures and those rain chances as we close out the last few days of the month of February. So our streak of below average days, 3 in a row, that has come to an end. Obviously not as substantial as, how many days in a row is this? I think this is 13 days in a row that we did see from the 9th all the way to the 21st, where we saw some above average high temperatures. So a lot of red on this February calendar graphic and double the number of above average days that we have seen for below average days in the month of February. So it looks like this last full month of winter obviously hasn't necessarily felt like it. We have to really go back to the beginning of this work week, of course, for that cold snap that we did see after the passage of the last front, and the very beginning of the month of February, where we were still holding on to that cold winter weather that we did see at the end of January, which sprouted a bunch of our winter weather chances. So for today, warm and windy, just like the last couple of days. The winds have been very, very stubborn and have not really wanted to get out of the forecast. They will continue to blow out of the southwest around 10 to 15 miles per hour sustained, and the occasional gust could get up to around 25 to 30 miles per hour, maybe even a couple of isolated and localized areas where we do see some gusts even faster than 30 miles per hour. Showers and storms will begin to roll in later on today. We might see a peak of sunshine or two. Overall, I do anticipate today to be more so on the mostly cloudy side of things. And of course, hearing a couple rumbles of thunder, that's going to come within the main line of rain itself, so ahead of the actual cold front. If we do get some peaks of sunshine, and I do anticipate those kind of dry periods that we will have for most of the afternoon, I think 72 is going to be our high temperature today. Maybe a little bit higher than what our graphics have been saying, but let's go ahead and shape it up and kind of match it up with this graphic, where it has us peaking at 68 degrees later this afternoon, around 4 and 5 o'clock. Typically, we can see a good amount of disagreement between both of these. We nailed the high temperature yesterday of 68 degrees. We might not necessarily make it to 70 degrees, but however, this is going to not really be the focus of your forecast. The main focus is going to be the rain chances, and all you need to know is we will feel like the 60s for a majority of today. We might just have a slim window there in the afternoon where we could crawl above that 70-degree mark. So surface map wise, this is our frontal boundary that is beginning to move in, and it has fluctuated a little bit, I do imagine, but it is driving all of these rain chances that you see in the northern portion of the state, and we are going to continue to watch it push down to the south and the southeast. But it is not going to have that clean motion through. So it's not just going to continuously move at a consistent speed. It is looking to push into Georgia, but then it is also looking to stall in the northern portion of the state. Right now, the general guidance is pretty closer to the Atlanta area, which you will see here on Future View. That's going to kind of be a continuous axis of some rain where that frontal boundary does stall. Now, say we don't go according to Future View and we see the frontal boundary stall somewhere here in central Georgia, that's going to result in some higher rainfall totals for a select few spots. But right now, the general guidance is we're going to see a pretty I would say, consistent motion with this frontal boundary as it pushes from north to south. But let's go ahead and talk about what's in store for the rest of your Thursday afternoon before we get into the front pushing down itself. So scattered and spotty rain chances for the rest of today. What I mean by that is a select few spots are going to catch a couple sprinkles. Your satellite and radar imagery is going to look a whole lot like it just did when we talked about it. There's going to be maybe a few sprinkles scattered across a couple of different counties, maybe some pockets of some steadier rain, but it's not going to be widespread by any means. It's kind of just hit or miss rain for the remainder of your Thursday. So as far as your afternoon plans go, as far as your evening plans go, kind of play it by ear. It does look like most of the bulk of the rain is going to hold off, maybe even as late as around 7 p.m. Now, I would say areas like Jasper, Putnam, Hancock, maybe into Monroe, Lamar counties, you guys farther up to the north and the northwest are going to pick up on some showers a little bit earlier than areas farther down to the south. But this looks really good right now and a very opportune forecast considering we will be live for the daybreak sleep out at 5 and 6 o'clock. I know Ben Jones has been happy with the recent trends that we have seen here on the graph model because he will be the one out there doing the weather from the field. So hopefully the rain will hold off so he can at least stay dry by the time he's heading out for his dinner break after those live shots. But then we see the front finally kick back into gear. Like I mentioned, those rainfall totals up near the Atlanta area, maybe getting along I-20, they're going to be pretty substantial, maybe even somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 inches if that boundary really stalls up there like Future View seems to think so. But I do anticipate that the bulk of the rain in the form of some showers, some pockets of some heavy showers, and even some thunderstorms, that's going to move in a little bit closer to the midnight hour into our northernmost counties. And it's going to mainly be an kind of overnight into early morning rain event. So this is 1 a.m. on Friday. Now starting to see this line push down into the Macon area. Then we go into 3 a.m. Still looks very widespread. Some pockets of some red in there, which are obviously indicating the thunderstorms, the heavier rainfall rates. Then we go into 5 a.m. If you're an early riser, you get out the door early, you maybe go to the gym before heading out to work or heading out to school, or you're just waking up early, maybe do your normal morning jog. I would probably advise against it as of tomorrow morning, as it's going to be a very messy environment. But if you are going to do anything outdoors early tomorrow morning, you're definitely going to want to have the rain gear. But make sure that when you do hear maybe some thunder, that means you need to go indoors. So when thunder roars, go indoors. That means that there are lightning strikes within the vicinity, and we're not looking at really clusters of them and widespread lightning and maybe consistent every couple of seconds. However, that is something that you definitely don't want to be outside for, along with the heavy rainfall rates, the gusty winds. So it's just going to be a nasty atmosphere for tomorrow morning, because we continue this all the way into 7 to 8 a.m. when most of you are actually waking up for that morning commute out to school, out to work, and it is still a messy environment. Rain chances in our northernmost counties may be gone by that morning commute time. So if you are traveling up to the north, you're in a whole lot of better shape than areas farther down to the south, which still by 9 a.m., the time that many of you need to be in the office tomorrow, we are still seeing pockets of some steady and some heavy rain. Wouldn't even doubt that we're still hearing a couple rumbles of thunder. But finally, as we go to around noon tomorrow, that's when we start to begin to see these rain chances taper off. So southern counties still holding on to those showers a little bit longer than areas farther to the north. By the time we get into evening commute home time on Friday, as we really kickstart the beginning of the weekend, rain chances aren't completely gone out of the picture, but they are going to be very, very insignificant compared to what passes through for the first half of your Friday. And we're only going to be dealing with a few spotty sprinkle chances, maybe into your Friday evening or Friday night plans. Then we go into Saturday morning, and actually it just looks like Future View updated on me right there in the middle of this. But nonetheless, it is maintaining the same idea for your Saturday morning. Gloomy atmosphere, few sprinkles or drizzles here and there, but the cloud cover does clear as we head into the afternoon. Might take a little bit past lunchtime in order for those clouds to clear, but then after that, it's going to be a story of some pretty clear blue skies as we go into the tail end of the weekend. Maybe a few passing clouds as we go into Sunday, but not expecting any rain chances after we get through basically the first half of your Friday. If we do see anything, it's going to be kind of a cover the bases 10 or 20% chance of a light shower. So it is daybreak sleep out, and obviously this is going past our live shots. We are going out for the beginning of it as of around 5 and 6 o'clock this evening. Well, it is looking to be a messy, messy atmosphere. So if you are planning on going out to the sleep out or participating in it, you are going to need a lot of those rain elements possibly with some tints. Make sure that you do stay dry, because as we go farther and farther into the overnight hours, maybe as you're trying to fall asleep, closer to around the midnight hour, that's when the heavier stuff is going to begin to move in the form of showers and possibly even some thunderstorms. Temperatures will be pretty consistent in the mid 60s, it does appear, until we get that rain to move through, and it will cool the temperatures down just a little bit as you wake up early at around 6 to 7 a.m. possibly for the end of that sleep out tomorrow morning. It's also going to be quite breezy. Overall, we could definitely dial up a better forecast for this daybreak sleep out. However, this is the cards that Mother Nature did deal us, and we definitely are going to really enjoy how much rain we are getting out of this frontal boundary. However, it is coming at the cost of a messy atmosphere for daybreak sleep out. So like I mentioned, pack all the rain gear that you can, everything that you will need to stay dry if you are still planning on braving the elements and participating in a great cause there for the daybreak sleep out. So over the next 3 days, you will continue to see the temperatures right there around the 70-degree mark for highs. Morning lows starting out somewhere in the 50s. We do have about an 80% chance of rain that is mainly for the evening, but emphasis on the word mainly, because you will see that for both Thursday and Friday. Mainly means that's where the bulk of the rain is going to be. That's not saying that other portions of the day can't have rain chances like we were talking about. For the rest of your Thursday afternoon, we're still going to continue to see a couple of isolated sprinkles, isolated drizzles, and a select few spots. But then as the front does come through, mainly overnight into early tomorrow morning, that's when we are looking at the bulk of those rain chances. So I would plan on late night tonight all the way into probably around the late morning time frame for your Friday. Once again, most of the rain chances are mainly in the morning on Friday, but we do still have a couple of sprinkle chances for the afternoon and the evening hours that are kind of wrapped into that 50%. So most of the rain going to be mainly late today and early tomorrow. After that, the rain chances are really going to taper off, and I put a 20% chance of a light shower on Saturday morning. It's more so looking about like a 10% chance of a sprinkle, so we'll continue to fine-tune that. The models did hint at a bit more of some widespread light showers early this morning that I was kind of set on believing, but now looking at it back in retrospect, we could probably bump that down to about a 10% chance. But the important thing to know is after we get to around lunchtime on Friday, I think the conditions are going to look a lot more suitable. But now let's turn our focus to what form this rain is going to come in, because we were talking about heavy showers. We were talking about a few rumbles of thunder. Well, you can see the day one storm outlook over here to the west of us. It extends into areas of central Alabama, all the way across central Mississippi, into the southeast corner of Arkansas, northeast corner of kind of the top of the boot of Louisiana. That's where the greatest potential for something in the way of severe weather is. Does that mean that we can't get a severe warning just because we are not in this green box? Absolutely not. Severe weather does not obey the boundaries that the SPC outlook does give them. However, it does mean that the confidence of severe weather is a lot greater over to the west of us. We are still looking at some thunderstorms in the forecast. They may not be severe. They may not necessarily be strong. There is a very low possibility that they could pop up a severe tag, but right now we are not outlined in this, so this gives us even less confidence than some of the weather systems that have come through as of recently that maybe have warranted a level 1 risk or have sprouted a severe thunderstorm risk or two. But even though these thunderstorms may not be severe, they can still pack a punch with 30 to 45 mile per hour gusts. You'll of course have some frequent lightning. You'll have some thunder that is maybe going to make for a bit of a restless night. And when you pair up those winds with some heavy rainfall rates, you're going to hear a lot of that rain hitting your window very likely overnight. So like I mentioned, it might be a bit of a restless night, even despite the fact that anything might have a severe or a non-severe tag on it. It is still going to be messy in those pockets of some pretty heavy rain. But going off of that, we always say that rain is not necessarily always a bad thing. In this case, it is going to be a very, very good thing. How about widespread totals that have remained pretty consistent, even with the model-to-model run changes that we've seen on the graph, around 1 to 2 inches. That's looking like the sweet spot of the range. And again, up here behind the banner, you're going to start to see some of those red and maybe even borderline orange colors, indicating some totals up there around the metro Atlanta area of 3 to maybe even 5 inches of rain. So that's because we are forecasting the front to stall out a little bit to the north of us. If we do see the frontal boundary stall out into central Georgia, we have the potential for maybe some totals closer to around 3 to maybe even 4 inches of rain in those areas where the front does stall over. But hey, 1 to 2 inches of rain, that's going to be, hopefully, fingers crossed, near double what we did see as of this past weekend. And this past weekend already resulted in a little bit of improvement on the drought conditions. So hopefully we are going to continue that trend. Now let's take a look at your winds and your wind gusts, kind of peaking around this red sector, maybe some faint pockets of pink as we go into the early afternoon hours. The breeze subsides a little bit as we go overnight into tomorrow morning, but as that frontal boundary itself drives through, there will be isolated pockets of some gusts that could get up to 30, like I mentioned, 40, maybe even 45 miles per hour. Then we go into Friday evening. There's really no breeze to talk about whatsoever, and I think that takes us into the rest of the weekend for Saturday and Sunday. Not expecting anything in the way of windy conditions. So already seeing something different with this frontal boundary as opposed to the last couple. The winds actually go away after the passage of it, unlike the one that we did see this past weekend where the winds were continuing to gust up to maybe 30, 35, or even 40 miles per hour in light of the wind advisory we saw issued after the passage of the last one. So that's going to be good news, but also something that we aren't seeing like we did see with this past weekend's front. We saw that major cool down, that major cold snap. Not going to see that as we go across the course of this weekend. We're really picking up where we left off as far as your afternoon high temperatures, somewhere in the low 70s, maybe the mid 70s, upper 70s, or you're just a touch or two lower, somewhere in the upper 60s like what you see for Friday afternoon. But Sunday should be the warmest and probably the best feeling afternoon that we do have, paired up with plenty of sunshine. 77 for a high temperature. Definitely looking forward to making some outdoor plans come around Sunday. And your morning lows are going to hover in the 50s, good deal around 10 to maybe even 15 degrees above average for the next couple of days. But as we finally get the cloud cover out of the picture overnight into the morning hours on Sunday, that's when we see the numbers drop down just a little bit more, mid 40s, but these numbers are still going to be above average. It's probably a forecast that you'll want some light layering for as you walk out the door to church on Sunday morning and maybe even going into next Monday morning for the start of a new work week. So here's a look at your long-range models. Sunday, 5 p.m., I mentioned we might have some passing clouds. Nothing really significant in the way of cloud cover whatsoever. But then some small rain chances. They are back in the forecast as we go into Monday afternoon. In the long-range models, they're really kind of just looking like spilled paint all over the place. And when we say that, we basically just mean that they're not agreeing on anything in the way of a widespread weather maker arriving for the beginning of next week. Could we have some rain chances? Yes, I put a 10% chance on both Monday and Tuesday, in fact, Wednesday as well, because we do see plenty of moisture in the near vicinity of us. However, it doesn't look like a widespread rainmaker is taking shape possibly until we get maybe into next Thursday. We see something back over here into Arkansas and maybe Missouri, but it does look like the agreement doesn't really last too long after we get into Thursday. So we'll continue to keep you posted as we get closer to next week. Right now, just throwing some 10% on there to just say you should be prepared for maybe seeing some rain chances already at the beginning of the work week next week. Otherwise, the temperatures are also just about in as much disagreement. I think I saw some models calling for some mid and upper 50s for high temperatures on Tuesday. And then I saw some other models calling for some low and some mid 70s. So I went with the middle ground high temperature for Tuesday at 65 degrees. Once again, we'll cross that bridge once we get there. You should still plan on at least some near average or slightly above average temperatures for each of the next 7 days. That is the guidance that we do have the most confidence in right now. And once again, your rain chances for the rest of today, mainly the late night hours, but also not necessarily just secluded to the late night hours. I would plan on evening time all the way into tomorrow morning. That's when we're going to have a widespread messy atmosphere, some pretty steady, even some heavy showers, and even hear a couple pockets of some thunder and indicating some lower end thunderstorms. We're not forecasting anything in the way of severe weather, but of course it doesn't remain entirely out of the realm of possibility. But it is very good confidence that we won't see anything because we are not outlined in anything in the way of a severe weather risk. That 20% chance of rain on Saturday morning, like I said, we'll probably bump that down to 10. Overall, I wouldn't plan on much in the way of rain for your Saturday and your Sunday. It's just going to be a bit of a gloomy start to your Saturday, but that cloud cover will clear as we go into the afternoon. And then we peak the top of the roller coaster, 77 degrees for that first day of March. And then I imagine as we go into next week, we're going to start to talk about things like pollen Yes, I'm sure that's the last thing that you want to hear. So we are eagerly going to be awaiting a lot of rainmakers as we go into the month of March, because with the pollen levels that are going to get maybe a bit of an early start to spring, we are going to eagerly await some rain to wash away some of that pollen that is destined to run rampant over the next couple of weeks. So that's where things stand. Grab the rain jacket before heading out the door for your morning commute tomorrow morning, and you'll very likely need it for any evening plans this Thursday. Other than that, we'll see you back at 11 a.m. tomorrow for the latest update on your weekend forecast.